My name is Elizabeth. I'm 34 years old, and for a decade I've been a project manager in New York City. For years, my life was defined by my job, not by my home. But today, that all changed. After a decade of saving, of living on ramen and hand-me-down furniture, this day finally came. The day I finally bought my own home. This was my slice of the world. The next morning, I returned to my new home, filled with peaceful anticipation. I pulled out my brand new keys, ready to walk into my future. The world felt right. It was my key, my lock, my door. But as I slid the key into the lock, it didn't fit. I tried again, pushing harder. The key scraped uselessly against the metal. A cold feeling of dread began to creep in. This wasn't my lock. While my parents were busy building Lauren's life, they forgot to build mine. She got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I got a "you'll get your turn" that never came. They paid for Lauren's private college, her fancy apartment, and even the down payment on her first condo. Their financial support was a never-ending river, flowing only in one direction toward her. I learned early on that I was on my own. My college applications were filled out on my own. My student loans were paid off on my own. Every single milestone was a solitary victory. They always told me to just ask if I needed help, but I knew the cost. Their help was an invisible chain, a way to keep me dependent. It wasn't about love, it was about control. I refused to pay that price. So for 10 years, I became a master of sacrifice. I worked extra shifts. I cooked every meal. I wore the same coat for 5 winters. The dream of my own home was the fire that kept me going. The 10-year journey to buy my house wasn't a straight line. It was a grind. Every decision, every single day was a calculation. I had a single mission: cut every expense, save every penny. While my colleagues were buying designer clothes and dining at fancy restaurants, I wore the same coat for 5 winters. I cooked simple meals at home. My friends called me the hermit. I just called it my future. Every skipped coffee, every turned down invitation, every extra work shift was a brick in the wall of my independence. I wasn't just saving money, I was building a fortress against a family that would never support me. The decision to buy a house was mine alone. And because I knew my family, the decision to keep it a secret was even more important. I couldn't risk them finding out, not before the ink was dry. My parents were masters of interference. My mother would say, "I'm just trying to help," while trying to control every aspect of my life. My father would nod along, his silence a stamp of approval for her schemes. They always had a way of turning my triumphs into theirs, or worse, into a crisis for Lauren. If they found out I had this much saved, they'd demand I help her with her struggles. They would say, "Family helps family," but their version of help was always a one-way street. They'd use my money to fix Lauren's problems, leaving me with nothing but a thankless gesture and a broken dream. Keeping my life private wasn't just about saving my money. It was about saving my soul. It was about building a life that was truly, unconditionally mine. This house was the ultimate act of self-preservation. Standing alone in my new home, for the first time, I felt truly free. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. I looked at the keys in my hand. They were more than just metal. They were a promise. A promise I made to myself years ago. I thought back to the last time my family meddled in my life, when they borrowed my college fund for Lauren's new car. They had taken so much from me, but this time it was different. This house was my hard-earned reward. It was the physical manifestation of my independence. I squeezed the keys tightly, feeling their cold weight. In that quiet moment, a silent vow echoed in my mind. A vow to myself and to every girl who was ever overlooked. This will never be taken from me. This was my final stand. Consumed by my fury, I didn't even hear her approach. "Excuse me, are you okay?" a kind, elderly voice asked. It was my neighbor, Eleanor. She looked at me with genuine concern. I gave her a half-hearted smile. "I'm fine, thank you." But she didn't look convinced. "I just wanted to be sure," she said, her eyes shifting nervously toward my front door. "I saw some people here earlier." My heart skipped a beat. "What people?" I asked, my voice suddenly sharp. She seemed taken aback. "A woman and an older couple. They looked like your family. They were trying to get inside." My suspicion gave way to a cold, hard certainty. "They were here," I whispered to myself. Not a guess, not a suspicion. It was a fact. The confirmation was a bitter pill to swallow. I wanted to deny it, but Eleanor's honest eyes told me the truth. Her sympathy felt like salt on an open wound. It made the pain burn, and at the same time, it made the path forward clearer. And then, she said the one thing that changed everything. The detail that confirmed my worst fears and gave me a path forward. She looked over her shoulder, lowering her voice. "They had a locksmith with them, too." The words echoed in my head. They had a locksmith with them. My mind reeled. It was a planned, deliberate act. They came here with the full intent to change my locks. A terrifying picture formed in my mind. My parents, Lauren, and a locksmith, all standing on my property. My personal space. My sanctuary. It felt like they were trying to steal my very identity, to erase my new beginning. The violation landed like a physical punch to the gut. The home I had sacrificed everything for, the one thing I vowed would never be taken, had already been invaded. The promise I made to myself was under attack. They didn't just want to control my life, they wanted to seize it. This was no longer about money or a simple house. It was a power struggle, a twisted game meant to prove that my life still belonged to them. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated me. The shock that first flattened me sharpened into a cold, clear resolve. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a criminal act. And now I had a witness. The next day, my anger and disbelief turned into a cold, methodical quest for answers. My new house, my potential sanctuary, felt tainted. The feeling of violation was too raw. I had to know why they were so desperate to get inside, and what they knew that I didn't. My hands flew across the keyboard, typing in the address. I started digging into the house's ownership history, looking at old public records and property logs. I was searching for anything, any clue that could explain their motive. And then I found it. A name I knew all too well. The house's previous owners, listed years ago, were my grandparents, Eleanor and Thomas. It was the same house I had visited as a child, with my grandmother's sprawling rose garden and the creak of the old wooden stairs. A flood of memories rushed back. The smell of her lemon polish, the sound of his grandfather clock. This wasn't just a house, it was the house. The very place I had so many happy childhood memories. The place my parents had told me was just too old to keep in the family. I dug deeper, my hands trembling. The record showed the house was sold exactly 5 years ago. My mind raced back to that time, to what was happening in my family back then. A knot formed in my stomach as I saw the truth coming into focus. 5 years ago, Lauren's life was a complete financial disaster. Her failed startup, her reckless gambling debts, her inability to hold a job. She had burned through every last dime, and then some. My parents had to do something drastic to save her from herself. My parents sold my grandparents' home to cover Lauren's mess. They took a house filled with my happy memories, a house that should have been a family legacy, and they sacrificed it to save their golden child. The injustice was breathtaking. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Their desperation to get inside my new home wasn't just about control. It was about trying to reclaim a piece of their past that they had foolishly given away. They were trying to undo their own colossal mistake, and they were willing to use me and my hard-earned money to do it. But I had beaten them to it. Without even knowing, I had reclaimed what they lost. I had purchased not just a house, but my family's stolen legacy. It wasn't just a simple transaction. It was an act of poetic justice. And now they wanted to steal it back from me. The truth had set a fire in me, but it was a cold, calculated flame. No more fear. No more shock. It was time for action. I wasn't just a victim, I was a project manager. And this project was my life. The first order of business: secure the perimeter. I went straight to the hardware store. I bought the most secure locks I could find, and a high-tech security camera system. Their invasion had been an act of power, and I was about to show them that I held all the power now. Back at the house, I methodically installed the cameras. I positioned them to capture every angle of the front door, the yard, and the street. I wasn't just recording for security, I was creating undeniable proof, my own personal surveillance system for my family. Then I took out the new locks. The sound of the drill was a symphony of defiance. With every turn of the screwdriver, I felt a piece of my past being shed. The old lock, their lock, came off. My new, unbreakable lock went on. I held the new key in my hand. This wasn't just a key to my house. It was a key to my freedom. A symbol of my victory over a lifetime of manipulation. The feeling was powerful, intoxicating, and utterly mine. But I didn't stop there. I compiled all the documents, the house's ownership history, the records of the sale to cover Lauren's debts, and my own purchase agreement. I created a physical timeline of their betrayal, all neatly organized. Every single piece of evidence was now at my fingertips. I wasn't just reclaiming a house, I was reclaiming a legacy. The history they had sold was now mine to tell. I had taken back what was stolen, not just from me, but from my grandparents. This house was no longer a symbol of their shame, but a monument to my resilience. I had a fortress, proof of their crime, and a clear purpose. I was no longer afraid. Let them come back. Let them try to get in. I was ready. For the first time, I felt truly safe, not because of a lock, but because of my own strength. After meticulously securing the house, I finally sat down on the cold floor in my living room. The profound quiet was deafening, a stark and welcome contrast to the lifetime of family chaos I had just escaped. The initial fury of the betrayal had passed, replaced by a quiet, ice-cold clarity. I had to decide what happens next. What was I going to do with this new, profound freedom? I could take the easy path. I could call my parents, feign a happy voice, and pretend it was all a simple misunderstanding. I could accept their manufactured apologies, which would feel as hollow as they always did. I could go back to being the good daughter, the one who always made sacrifices for the family's sake. But I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this path led to a lifetime of silent pain and unfulfilled potential. It was a well-worn path I had walked for 34 years. My entire life had been meticulously defined by their unreasonable expectations, their cunning manipulation, and their endless, sickening favoritism toward Lauren. The very walls of this house, my legacy, stood as a painful testament to their calculated cruelty. The other path was the terrifying unknown, a path of defiance of true and unconditional independence. It meant cutting ties, setting firm and unyielding boundaries, and facing a world where I was truly and completely on my own for the first time. It meant giving up the fragile, manipulative family I had for a profound and absolute freedom I had never known. In that decisive moment, I looked at the new security cameras blinking silently like watchful guardians, and the new lock shining brightly, a sentinel of my new life. I had spent an entire decade building this fortress, meticulously brick by brick. Not just a house, but a life free from their chains. Every sacrifice I had made was a purchase, a down payment on my own freedom. I had spent 10 years to buy my own life. I thought about my grandmother's house, the living memory they had sold to save Lauren from the consequences of her own foolishness. The legacy that should have been shared but was instead sacrificed, and I knew my choice was not just for me. It was a vow for my grandparents too. I was not going to let this legacy be sold or manipulated or stolen ever again. I would protect it at all costs from all of them. My resolve solidified into something as unyielding as the new steel lock on my door. I stood up, my posture straight, my mind clear. My heart was strong, no longer burdened by their expectations. The choice was made. I would not call them. I would not offer an explanation. I would not beg for their forgiveness or their love. I would not play their sick game anymore. This house was my fortress, and I was its fiercely protective keeper. My life was my own, my hard-earned sanctuary, now and forever. My position was clear. The peaceful silence of my new fortress was shattered by a sound I had almost forgotten, the doorbell. I felt a surge of adrenaline race through my veins, but it wasn't fear. It was pure, exhilarating anticipation. This was the moment I had prepared for. I walked to the security monitor with a calm that felt alien, my heart steady, and my mind clearer than it had ever been. On the screen, I saw them. My mother with her practiced, overly cheerful smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father, his usual placid expression a mask for his true feelings. And Lauren, looking predictably impatient and annoyed, clutching a small box in her hands. They were on my turf now, not the other way around. The power shift was a delicious feeling. I pressed the button to speak, my voice devoid of warmth. "Can I help you?" My mother's practiced smile faltered, her face visibly falling. "Elizabeth, why are you talking to us through a camera? Don't be silly. Let us in. We brought some of your old things from the garage." My mother's voice quickly filled with her usual manufactured offense. "We drove all this way to see you. We're your family," she insisted, her tone growing sharper. But I could see the real emotion in her eyes, not anger, but frustration at the lack of control. My father remained silent. Lauren shifted her weight and made a quick, condescending comment. "Wow, is this your idea of a greeting?" They were trying to use their usual tactics: guilt tripping, emotional manipulation. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly immune. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt, shame, or obligation. I felt a deep, profound sense of calm, knowing that their old tricks, their old games, held absolutely no power over me anymore. I was a different person now. I walked to the front door, the new unyielding steel lock a comforting weight. I cracked the door open just a sliver, the chain lock holding it firm. The look on their faces was priceless, a mixture of shock and unbridled anger at my blatant defiance. Their practiced smiles had vanished, replaced by sheer confusion. They were no longer in control, and they couldn't comprehend it. My mother, losing all patience, put her hand on the door and tried to push it wider, but it was impossible. The door held firm. "Elizabeth, what is this?" she demanded, her voice dropping all pretense of kindness, a clear sign of her true frustration. "Let us in. This is absolutely ridiculous. We're not leaving until you open this door fully." My mother's face twisted in pure frustration. Her aggressive push against the door was met with a wall of immovable steel, a physical manifestation of my resolve. Behind her, Lauren stepped forward, her usual veneer of entitlement finally cracking. "Come on, Elizabeth," she pleaded, her voice a forced, trembling calm. "This is ridiculous. Just open the door. We really need to talk to you about something important." My father remained a silent, useless statue, a ghost of a man. My mother, seeing that her usual intimidation tactics were failing, finally broke. Her voice, once so sharp and controlling, became a desperate, high-pitched whine. "Elizabeth, please, don't do this. Let us in. We need to come in. This is so important. It's for us." And then, in a moment of pure, unbridled panic, she said the words I had been waiting for my entire life. The words that confirmed every single one of my deepest suspicions and turned the tide of the war. Her voice cracked, a frantic, desperate plea. "We're here to buy the house back." A shocked, profound silence fell over them. Lauren's eyes went wide with pure panic. She lunged forward, her face a mask of horror, and grabbed my mother's arm. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Shut up. We can't tell her that. You're ruining everything." My mother, completely blind to Lauren's panic, was only focused on me. "We want it back. We made a terrible mistake selling it. We need this house, and we will buy it from you. Just let us in. We have the money." The full, bitter irony of the situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. They wanted to buy back a house they sold to save Lauren from her disastrous debts, using the money from a foundation that was built on my hard-earned work. They wanted to use my money to buy back my own house, which was also their old family home. For a second, their desperation hung in the air like a thick fog. This was it. The moment I had dreamed of for months, the moment I had worked for relentlessly. I took a deep, steadying breath. My voice was calm and controlled, but it carried an unyielding finality that silenced them both. "It's not for sale," I said, the words echoing in the sudden silence. "This house is not for sale. Not now, not ever." A heavy, suffocating silence followed my final words. My parents and Lauren stood frozen in place, their faces a horrifying mixture of shock and utter disbelief. For a fleeting second, I thought they might actually accept their defeat and leave. But then, a slow, terrible flicker of something new appeared in my mother's eyes, cold, blinding, unhinged rage. Her face, which had been contorted in a pleading mask just a moment ago, now twisted into a grotesque mask of pure fury. "This is our family house, you selfish, ungrateful little girl," she screamed, her voice a raw, ugly sound that I had never heard before. "You think you can just steal it from us? You think you own it?" Lauren, fueled by her own blind desperation and rage, joined her. They started pounding on the door together, a frantic, rhythmic assault that shook the entire frame. Their fists slammed against the cold, unyielding steel, a sound that was a sickening, primal echo of their utter irrationality. "Let us in. We have to get in there?" My father just stood there, watching the chaos. He didn't try to stop them. He just stood there, a useless, pathetic bystander to the emotional and physical violence he had helped to create. The security cameras were recording every single second of it. The sound of their yelling and the violent pounding on the door was all the evidence I needed to end this for good. I watched them, a profound sense of calm washing over me. They had just crossed a final, unforgivable line. All pretense of a normal family visit was gone. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about their sense of entitlement, their need for control, and a final, desperate act of violence. This was what I had been preparing for. Their frantic pounding began to weaken, their yelling became hoarse, their fury burning out. All that was left was exhaustion and defeat. My mother and Lauren sank to the ground, defeated. Their last tantrum had not only failed completely, it had also proven that they were willing to resort to violence to get what they wanted. I walked back to the security monitor. I pressed the button one last time, my voice strong and unwavering, leaving no room for negotiation or argument. "Leave now. If you ever come back, if you ever try this again, I will have the police escort you from my property. This is your only warning. The game is over, and you have lost." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother and Lauren were a defeated heap on the ground. My father stood motionless, a silent pillar of complicity. They were finally quiet. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't just going to send them away. They needed to hear everything, every ugly truth. They needed to know that I knew. I pressed the intercom button one last time. My voice was calm, almost conversational, a chilling contrast to their recent hysteria. "I think you deserve to know something," I said. "I've spent the last few weeks doing some research. A lot of research. On all of you." My mother looked up, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She was confused. Lauren was too scared to even move. "I know about the house," I said, letting the words hang in the air like a death sentence. "The full, complete history. The one you tried so hard to bury beneath layers of lies and manipulation. You always told me that Grandpa and Grandma sold you the house because they were getting too old. I continued, my voice a quiet, venomous whisper. That was the first lie. The property records show a transfer of ownership, not a sale. A gift given out of love and trust. My grandparents, in their last moments, gave you everything. They trusted you to protect their legacy. They gave you this house, their life's work, a testament to their love. And what did you do with that love? What did you do with their legacy? You sold it. My mother looked up, her eyes wide with shock. How did you find out all of this? I smiled a cold, humorless smile. I bought the house, remember? And I got my hands on the full title history. You didn't do a very good job of burying your dirty, little secrets. You didn't just sell the house to get a fresh start, I continued, my voice unwavering. You sold it to pay for Lauren's mistakes, to clear her debts. You sold my grandparents' home to bail out the golden child. All for a daughter who refused to take responsibility for her own actions. My mother started to cry again, but this time it wasn't a tantrum. It was the sound of a woman who had been completely exposed and defeated. And then you tried to buy it back, I said, my voice hardening, using my money from the foundation I started. The irony is staggering. You expected me to just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars to your foundation to clean up yet another one of your messes. You expected the good daughter to play her role, the one who always cleans up your messes. But this time, I'm not cleaning it up. I'm keeping it all the lies, all the secrets, all the betrayal, all the truth. And this house, I'm keeping it all as a monument. And I'm keeping it all to finally set myself free from you. Lauren finally found her voice, a weak, pathetic whisper. But we're family. You can't do this to us. This is so cruel, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Don't you love us? I laughed, a single, sharp sound that was colder than ice. Family, I said. You gave up that right the day you sold this house. The day you put a price tag on a legacy of love and trust. A price tag on my grandparents' home. I looked at my father, who still hadn't said a word. And you, Dad, I said, my voice softer, but laced with a profound disappointment. You stood there and watched them do it. You said nothing when they sold it. You stood there and watched them today. You never said a word. My voice grew louder, now with the full power of my vindication. You taught me a lesson about business. You taught me a lesson about trust. You taught me a lesson about family. And now, you will pay the price for that lesson. Your debt is not with the bank. Your debt is with me. And it is a debt of silence, of betrayal, and of lies. I looked at them all one last time. My mother, defeated. Lauren, terrified. My father, ashamed. The game was over. I had won. But it wasn't a victory of money. It was a victory of truth. And I was finally free. I took a deep breath. The house is no longer for sale, I stated, my final words. But I am keeping it. I am keeping it as a monument to my grandparents' love and their beautiful, stolen legacy. And I am keeping it as a monument to your profound betrayal. I am keeping it as a constant, daily reminder that blood is not always thicker than water. That sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. That some families are not worth saving. That some lies cannot be forgiven. This house is no longer just a house. It's a living, breathing testament to my resilience. It's the final piece of my revenge. And every time you drive by, you will have to remember what you lost. And every time you drive by, you will remember why. And I will be inside, safe and sound, finally at peace. Because you won't ever be able to get in. Not ever again. Not to me. Not to my life. Not to my house. The air in the sterile conference room was thick with tension. Weeks had passed since their failed ambush, and now we were in my territory. My family sat across the long table, their expressions a mix of arrogance and nervous defiance. Their lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man, cleared his throat. My lawyer, a sharp, no nonsense woman, placed a file on the table. She didn't even look at them. As you know, we are here today to discuss the legal ramifications of the fraudulent transfer of property that occurred on your parents' property in 2022. We have presented our case. My mother scoffed, leaning forward. Fraudulent? This is ridiculous. We are family. Her lawyer gave her a quick, silencing look. My lawyer didn't even flinch. She simply continued, your family's actions have consequences. Your client also failed to disclose a history of financial misconduct. She presented the first piece of evidence, the title deed and the forged signature. We have multiple signed affidavits confirming that the signature on this document is not that of your father. That is a crime. A very serious one. The slick lawyer's confident face finally cracked. He looked at my parents, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. My mother looked at him, her face pale. This was not the reunion they had envisioned. This was a legal war they couldn't win. My lawyer leaned forward, her voice low and menacing. We are prepared to take this to trial. We have the evidence. We have the motive. We have your client's recorded confession. We have everything. The only question is, what are you willing to do to avoid jail time? The air was thick with the weight of my lawyer's words. The family's silence was not out of respect, but out of pure, unadulterated fear. My mother, seeing her last hope fading, abandoned her arrogance and tried one final time to use her only remaining weapon, guilt. Her voice broke, a pathetic, sobbing whisper that was a parody of the love she always pretended to have. Elizabeth, please, she said, her hands clasped together. We're family. We love you. Can't we just put all of this behind us and talk about this like a family? I looked at her, my face completely devoid of any emotion. My lawyer sat beside me, a stoic guardian. I took a sip of my water, the sound of the glass on the table a sharp contrast to her sobs. I am not here to talk about love, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'm here to talk about legal and financial consequences. That is all we have to discuss. But why? My mother stammered, her voice rising in a frantic pitch. After all we've done for you, why are you doing this? Why are you hurting your own family? Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she was too desperate to listen. She truly believed she was the victim, and then it hit me. They had created a beautiful, perfectly constructed fantasy, a story where they were the heroic victims and I was the ungrateful child. They didn't see me as a person with my own feelings, just an asset, a resource to be used and discarded. What you've done for me? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. You didn't do anything for me. You raised a tool to be used to protect the golden child. You loved me only when I was useful, when I was convenient. That isn't love. That is manipulation. Lauren scoffed, her voice brittle with indignation. That's not fair. You always got what you wanted. You were always the good one. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the silence. I got what I wanted. I wanted a real family, a real home, and you took it away. My voice grew louder, gaining strength with every word. This isn't about the money. This isn't about the house. This is about you, all of you. You believed your own lies. You believed that I would always be the one to forgive you, to fix your problems, to pretend everything was okay. My lawyer put a hand on my shoulder, a quiet signal to stop, but I wasn't finished. This wasn't for the lawyers. This was for me, and it was for them. They had to hear it all. The full, unedited version of the truth. The slick lawyer finally spoke, his voice weak. What exactly do you want? He asked. The house, I stated, my voice like a hammer. You can't have it. We've proven the fraud, and we will take it all the way to court unless you give up any and all claim to it. This is not a negotiation, I added, looking at my parents. This is a formal agreement. You are to never contact me again. Ever. You will never try to see me, never send letters, never text. You are to cease and desist any and all contact. My mother started to protest, but her lawyer put a firm hand on her arm. "She means it," he said, his voice low. "She has the evidence to put you all in prison. She has you on tape. She has the documents. She can do this." My mother's face went pale. The beautiful reality she had constructed for herself finally shattered. The walls of her fantasy came crashing down, and she was left with nothing but the ugly truth of her actions. This was it, the final, painful, perfect end. I left the lawyer's office without a backward glance. The sterile, cold room and the defeated looks on their faces were already a distant memory. I didn't feel anger or hate. I felt a profound sense of peace. I drove home, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like home. The familiar street felt different. The air was lighter. My car was silent, a stark contrast to the shouting and frantic pleading from just hours before. The quiet was a luxury I had earned. I walked up the front path, the familiar stones under my feet. The door, which had been a battle line just weeks ago, now looked like a simple boundary. A boundary I had every legal, physical, and emotional right to enforce. I unlocked the door, and the click of the lock was a satisfying sound. It was the sound of a chapter closing forever. I stepped inside. The house was quiet, no more yelling, no more frantic pounding, just the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I walked through the rooms, a pilgrimage through my own history. This house wasn't just a physical space. It was a witness to my life, and I was finally a part of its story again. Later that day, I took the ultimate, final step. I hired a locksmith. We changed every single lock on every single door. The old, rusty locks were replaced with new, shiny ones. It was a physical manifestation of my emotional journey. The new keys were heavy in my hand. They were not just keys to a house. They were keys to my new life. A life I had fought to protect, to create, to claim. They were the keys to my freedom. I put them on a new keychain, a simple, final act of possession. I sat on the front porch, the setting sun painting the sky in colors of orange and pink. The house was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a symbol of my strength. I had taken back what was mine, not for revenge, but for peace, for the truth. This was my ultimate revenge. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about healing me. It was about ending the lies, ending the manipulation, and finally ending the cycle of pain. It was about defining my own reality, my own identity. I had spent so many years trying to be the person they wanted me to be. The good daughter. The one who always put them first. The one who sacrificed everything. But that person wasn't real. She was a creation of their distorted reality. And I had finally killed her. Now I was just Elizabeth, a woman in her own home. A woman who had finally learned that family doesn't have to be a word filled with pain and obligation. It can be a word of choice, a word of love and honesty. This house wasn't just a physical structure. It was a monument to my resilience. It was the final piece of my revenge. And every time I stepped inside, I would be reminded that I had won my life back, and I had finally found my way home. The air was thick with the weight of my lawyer's words. The family's silence was not out of respect, but out of pure, unadulterated fear. My mother, seeing her last hope fading, abandoned her arrogance and tried one final time to use her only remaining weapon, guilt. Her voice broke, a pathetic, sobbing whisper that was a parody of the love she always pretended to have. "Elizabeth, please," she said, her hands clasped together. "We're family. We love you. Can't we just put all of this behind us and talk about this like a family?" I looked at her, my face completely devoid of any emotion. My lawyer sat beside me, a stoic guardian. I took a sip of my water, the sound of the glass on the table a sharp contrast to her sobs. "I am not here to talk about love," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm here to talk about legal and financial consequences. That is all we have to discuss." But why?" My mother stammered, her voice rising in a frantic pitch. After all we've done for you, why are you doing this? Why are you hurting your own family?" Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she was too desperate to listen. She truly believed she was the victim. And then it hit me. They had created a beautiful, perfectly constructed fantasy, a story where they were the heroic victims and I was the ungrateful child. They didn't see me as a person with my own feelings, just an asset, a resource to be used and discarded. "What you've done for me?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You didn't do anything for me. You raised a tool to be used to protect the golden child. You loved me only when I was useful. When I was convenient? That isn't love. That is manipulation." Lauren scoffed, her voice brittle with indignation. "That's not fair. You always got what you wanted. You were always the good one." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the silence. "I got what I wanted. I wanted a real family, a real home, and you took it away." My voice grew louder, gaining strength with every word. "This isn't about the money. This isn't about the house. This is about you, all of you. You believed your own lies. You believed that I would always be the one to forgive you, to fix your problems, to pretend everything was okay." My lawyer put a hand on my shoulder, a quiet signal to stop. But I wasn't finished. This wasn't for the lawyers. This was for me, and it was for them. They had to hear it all. The full, unedited version of the truth. I took a deep breath, and I looked at my mother and Lauren, then at my father. "You have always had a beautiful, perfectly constructed distortion of reality," I said, my voice full of a chilling finality. "You are the victims, you are the good ones, you are the loving family, but I am not a victim anymore. You cannot hurt me with your lies. You cannot manipulate me with your guilt. I am the truth. I am the reality, and the truth has won, and you have lost everything because of it." The slick lawyer finally spoke, his voice weak. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. "The house," I stated, my voice like a hammer. "You can't have it. We've proven the fraud, and we will take it all the way to court unless you give up any and all claim to it." "This is not a negotiation," I added, looking at my parents. "This is a formal agreement. You are to never contact me again. Ever. You will never try to see me, never send letters, never text. You are to cease and desist any and all contact." My mother started to protest, but her lawyer put a firm hand on her arm. "She means it," he said, his voice low. "She has the evidence to put you all in prison. She has you on tape. She has the documents. She can do this." My mother's face went pale. The beautiful reality she had constructed for herself finally shattered. The walls of her fantasy came crashing down, and she was left with nothing but the ugly truth of her actions. This was it, the final, painful, perfect end. I left the lawyer's office without a backward glance. The sterile, cold room and the defeated looks on their faces were already a distant memory. I didn't feel anger or hate. I felt a profound sense of peace. I drove home, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like home. The familiar street felt different. The air was lighter. My car was silent, a stark contrast to the shouting and frantic pleading from just hours before. The quiet was a luxury I had earned. It was the sound of my life finally beginning. I walked up the front path, the familiar stones under my feet. The door, which had been a battle line just weeks ago, now looked like a simple boundary. A boundary I had every legal, physical, and emotional right to enforce. I unlocked the door, and the click of the lock was a satisfying sound. It was the sound of a chapter closing forever. I stepped inside. The house was quiet. No more yelling. No more frantic pounding. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I walked through the rooms, a pilgrimage through my own history. This house wasn't just a physical space. It was a witness to my life, and I was finally a part of its story again. Later that day, I took the ultimate, final step. I hired a locksmith. We changed every single lock on every single door. The old, rusty locks were replaced with new, shiny ones. It was a physical manifestation of my emotional journey. The new keys were heavy in my hand. They were not just keys to a house. They were keys to my new life. A life I had fought to protect, to create, to claim. They were the keys to my freedom. I put them on a new keychain, a simple, final act of possession. This was my home. I sat on the front porch, the setting sun painting the sky in colors of orange and pink. The house was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a symbol of my strength. I had taken back what was mine, not for revenge, but for peace, for the truth. This was my ultimate revenge. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about healing me. It was about ending the lies, ending the manipulation, and finally, ending the cycle of pain. It was about defining my own reality, my own identity. I had spent so many years trying to be the person they wanted me to be, the good daughter, the one who always put them first, the one who sacrificed everything. But that person wasn't real. She was a creation of their distorted reality, and I had finally killed her. Now, I was just Elizabeth, a woman in her own home, a woman who had finally learned that family doesn't have to be a word filled with pain and obligation. It can be a word of choice, a word of love and honesty. This house wasn't just a physical structure. It was a monument to my resilience. It was the final piece of my revenge. And every time I stepped inside, I would be reminded that I had won my life back, and I had finally found my way home. It has been 1 year since I last saw them, 1 year since I closed the door and began to truly live in my home. The house no longer feels like a monument to betrayal. It feels like a testament to resilience. The air is quiet. My mind is quiet. The revenge is over. The life has begun. I often get asked if it was worth it. If all the pain, the lies, the struggle was worth a house. And my answer is always the same. It was never about the house. It was about something so much more fundamental. It was about truth. The house was just a vessel, a physical representation of a family that had distorted reality. They had built a beautiful, perfect fantasy where they were the victims, and I was the ungrateful child. And I had finally shattered that fantasy into a million pieces. I no longer wait for their phone calls. I no longer feel guilty for their failures. I no longer feel the weight of their expectations. My life is my own. I get to choose who I love, who I trust, and what my family looks like. Revenge isn't a word I use often anymore. I prefer to think of it as a necessary act of self-preservation, a way to reclaim my identity and my reality, a way to finally stop being the person they wanted me to be and start being myself. The final act of my story isn't about them losing. It's about me winning my peace, winning my freedom, winning my life back. And it's a victory that can never be taken away from me, no matter what they do. It has been 1 year since I last saw them, 1 year since I closed the door and began to truly live in my home. The house no longer feels like a monument to betrayal. It feels like a testament to resilience. The air is quiet. My mind is quiet. The morning sun filters through the window, painting the living room in a warm golden light. I wake up naturally, without an alarm, no more rushing, no more frantic calls, just the gentle sound of birds chirping outside my window. A simple kind of freedom. I walk barefoot to the kitchen. The cool floorboards are a welcome shock. I make a cup of coffee. The rich, earthy smell of the coffee beans fills the air. This kitchen, which once held so many painful memories, now feels like a place of comfort. A place of my own creation. I sit on the couch, the warm mug in my hands. I look around the room. The new walls are painted a gentle blue. The old furniture is gone, replaced with pieces I chose myself. This isn't my grandparents' home anymore. It's not my parents' home. It is truly mine. And it is perfect. The silence is a living thing. It's not the tense, uncomfortable silence of a family trying to pretend. It's the peaceful, comfortable quiet of a home that is finally at peace. It's a silence that holds no secrets, no lies, and no manipulation. I walk to the backyard. I have planted a new garden. I kneel down and touch the soft soil. Each flower is a new memory. A memory that I am creating myself. A memory that is entirely my own. There is no one here to demand anything of me. I no longer wait for their phone calls. I no longer feel guilty for their failures. I no longer feel the weight of their expectations. My life is my own. I get to choose who I love, who I trust, and what my family looks like. And that is the greatest victory of all. Revenge isn't a word I use often anymore. I prefer to think of it as a necessary act of self-preservation, a way to reclaim my identity and my reality, a way to finally stop being the person they wanted me to be and start being myself. It was the only way I could find peace. The final act of my story isn't about them losing. It's about me winning. Winning my peace, winning my freedom, winning my life back. And it's a victory that can never be taken away from me. No matter what they do, I finally feel truly safe, truly at home. A year ago, I would have avoided this. Today, I don't even notice. I'm sitting at a coffee shop, lost in a book. The noise of the city is a gentle hum. Then, I hear a familiar, high-pitched voice. Elizabeth? My mother and sister stand over my table. I slowly look up. My mother's face is a practiced mask of gentle concern. "Oh, we're so glad we ran into you," she says. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Lauren looks at me, a tight, forced smile on her face. "You're looking well," Lauren adds, her voice a little too casual, like she's surprised. I close my book, placing it on the table. My heart isn't racing. I don't feel the familiar anxiety. I simply smile, a polite, distant smile. "Hello," I say. "It's a busy day out. Are you enjoying the weather?" My voice is calm, professional, detached, just the way I want it. "We've been worried about you," my mother says, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "It's been so long, we miss you. You know, family is everything. We can move past this." Her eyes plead for a reaction. I cut her off, not with anger, but with a polite, firm voice. "I'm doing very well, thank you," I say. "As you know, all legal matters have been settled, and our respective lawyers have made it clear that a certain distance is necessary for all parties' peace of mind. I respect that boundary." My mother flinches at the word legal. She tries a different approach. "But we're your family, Elizabeth. We love you. Can't we just try again? For the sake of the family?" The last word is full of desperation. I meet her eyes, my gaze steady. "Family is not a contract that requires me to forget fraud and betrayal," I say. "Family is about honesty and respect. We never had that. The past is exactly where it needs to be, in the past. We have nothing more to say to each other." Lauren finally loses her cool. "You're not going to just pretend we don't exist, are you?" She hisses. "You think you've won, don't you? Living in that house, all alone. Her bitterness is a physical thing, and she can't hide it." I look at her, then back at my book. "I'm not alone," I say. "I have peace. I have honest relationships. I have a home where I am safe. I have everything I ever wanted. I'm just not going to lie about it anymore." My voice is gentle, but it's a final declaration. A full stop. The sound of laughter fills the house, not the tense, strained laughter of my past. This is real, effortless laughter that fills the space that used to hold so much tension. My friends are gathered around the dinner table, the food is delicious, and the wine is flowing. This house is now a home filled with a family I chose. One of my friends, Sarah, raises her glass. "To Elizabeth," she says, "for having the courage to fight for her peace. You are the strongest person I know." Her words are genuine, a stark contrast to the hollow compliments I grew up with. This is what real support feels like. I look around the table. No one is talking about my inheritance. No one is making passive-aggressive comments about my choices. They are just talking about life, about movies and work and silly stories. This is what normal feels like. This is what unconditional love feels like. Later, we're sitting in the living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace. My friend, Mark, puts a hand on my shoulder. "You know, this house feels like you," he says. "It feels honest and warm. I'm so happy you have this." It's the most beautiful compliment I've ever received. He saw me, not my house. The revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about rebuilding me. And the most beautiful part of that reconstruction wasn't about the money or the house. It was about the people I found along the way. The people who saw my pain and chose to help me heal. My old family saw me as a resource. My new family sees me as a person. One is a conditional agreement. The other is a true connection. The difference is as clear as night and day, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. This is what it means to be truly free. The crowd rises to its feet, a wave of applause washing over the room. On the stage, under the bright lights, stands Elizabeth. This isn't just an award. This is the culmination of years of hard work, a victory born from the ashes of betrayal. This is a triumph they could never steal. She steps to the podium, the microphone cool against her hand. A year ago, she was a broken version of herself, silenced by her family. Now, her voice is her own. Clear, confident, unapologetic. She looks out at the faces in the crowd, and for the first time, she sees herself reflected in their respect. I look out at all of you, and I am filled with gratitude, not just for this honor, but for the journey that led me here. It's a journey I had to take alone. A path cleared by pain and paved with resilience. It taught me that my greatest strength was always within me. My old life was a constant performance. I was a character in a story they wrote for me. But you can't build a beautiful life on someone else's foundation. You have to burn that old script and start from scratch. You have to find your own voice, even if it shakes. The revenge wasn't about taking something from them. It was about building something for myself. It wasn't about tearing them down, but about lifting myself up. It was about creating a life so full of peace and purpose that their past actions no longer have any power over me. And that's what true victory feels like. I accept this award on behalf of anyone who has ever had to fight for their own story. For anyone who has had to redefine family home and success on their own terms. I hope my story shows you that your trauma can become your greatest strength. It is possible to heal. The applause is gone. The bright lights of the stage are gone. I walk through my front door, and the silence of my home is a comforting embrace. I shed my professional attire, the dress that felt so powerful on stage. Now, it's just me, Elizabeth, alone and at peace. I walk to the living room and place the award on the mantelpiece. It gleams in the soft light. It is a symbol of my hard work, but it is not the victory itself. The real victory is this moment. This quiet, honest moment of being in my own home without fear or doubt. The silence is golden. I walk to the window and catch my reflection in the dark glass. I see a woman who has been through hell and came out the other side. A woman who is not defined by her past, but by her future. A woman who has learned to love herself and to fight for herself. I don't see the little girl they tried to break anymore. I just see me. My journey was not a straight line. It was full of twists and turns, of despair and doubt. But every single challenge was a step toward this moment. Every tear was a brick in the foundation of my new life. Every act of defiance was an act of self-love. They tried to define me with their lies, their money, and their control. They told me that my worth was tied to their approval. I finally understand that my worth was never in their hands. It was always in mine, and that realization, that is the true victory. The revenge wasn't about taking something from them. It was about building something for myself. It wasn't about tearing them down, but about lifting myself up. It was about creating a life so full of peace and purpose that their past actions no longer have any power over me. And that's what true victory feels like. I no longer wait for their phone calls. I no longer feel guilty for their failures. I no longer feel the weight of their expectations. My life is my own. I get to choose who I love, who I trust, and what my family looks like. And that is the greatest victory of all. The sun sets on a new day, a day that is truly mine. I walk through my garden, touching the leaves I planted myself. My life is no longer a story about a family. It's a story about a woman who found her strength, built her own home, and chose her own path. It is a story about finding peace. I used to believe that revenge was the final act of a story, but I was wrong. Revenge isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the moment you decide to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. It's the moment you reclaim your narrative. It's a doorway to a new life. They may have taken my past, but they could never take my future. They may have tried to control my life, but they never owned my spirit. I am the author of my own story now, and that story is about forgiveness. Not for them, but for myself. My story is no longer about them. It's about me. It's about how I won my life back. It's about how I turned betrayal into freedom and pain into purpose. And that's all that matters. The end. Elizabeth's story is a powerful reminder of 5 key lessons. The first is to redefine revenge. It's not a dramatic confrontation or about bringing someone down. The most powerful act of rebellion is simply to build yourself up, to live a life so full of purpose that the pain of the past becomes insignificant. The second lesson is that boundaries are an act of self-love. You have the right to set clear limits with people who hurt you, even if they're family. Your mental and emotional well-being are not negotiable. You don't owe anyone your peace, and protecting it is the greatest act of self-care. Third, remember that happiness cannot be bought with money. Material wealth or social status can't fill an emotional void. True happiness comes from inner peace, from genuine connections, and from living a life that you chose for yourself, not one that was handed to you. The fourth lesson is that family is a choice. The love and support you need may not come from blood. You can build your own family, a community of people who see you for who you are and love you unconditionally. This is a family built on choice, not obligation. Finally, the fifth lesson: turn your pain into your greatest power. Your trauma can be a fuel for change. It is possible to heal, to turn betrayal into freedom, and to use your past as a foundation for a beautiful, authentic future. What's your first step? Leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.